My coverage of Player Core 2 continues. The next class in the alphabet is the Sorcerer. I'm Ronald the Rules Lawyer. I am a lawyer who runs tabletop role-playing games. My preferred system is Pathfinder 2e. I ran an after-school, middle-school RPG class for several years. Support my Patreon if you haven't yet. It allows me to continue making videos. I don't make money as a lawyer. The reason is in this video that you see on the screen. Supporting gives you ad-free early access to most of my videos and exclusive content. The Sorcerer is the quintessential spontaneous spellcaster. Their magic is derived from their bloodline. And they can have any of the four traditions in Pathfinder: Arcane, Primal, Divine, and Occult. As spontaneous casters, they have a relatively small spell repertoire, but they can choose at the moment of casting which spell they cast. They have more spell slots than other spontaneous spellcasters, at least I think so, and their class feats can favor flexibility. They have a lot of spell-shaped feats, formerly called metamagic, that they can use to bend their spells. For these reasons, they're great for people who want to be a spellcaster but might be a bit intimidated by Pathfinder and want something more straightforward. This definitely delivers. They are the no muss, no fuss caster class. Wham bam, thank you, Sam. Now, unlike the Oracle, which I covered in my last video, there is not a widespread perception in the community that the Sorcerer needs a buff or needs help. So we're going to see fewer changes in the remastered Sorcerer. However, they did make some changes, and this is what the video will cover. Okay, so here's their starting spread, and as for the starting proficiencies and hit points and so on, nothing has changed here. And in these remaster videos, I'm only going to be covering the changes. Here's that spell slot chart showing they get a lot of spell slots, up to 4 of each spell rank. And we now have a new class feature, Sorcerer's Potency. Whenever the Sorcerer casts a spell that does damage or heals hit points, they get to add a number equal to the spell's rank. There used to be a level 1 feat called Dangerous Sorcery that had this effect only on damage spells. Now this is default for all sorcerers, and it affects their healing spells also. This means that you are just plain better at casting spells than other casters. Screw having funky curses and witch familiars. Sheer power, baby! Again, here's another reason why this is a good recommendation for a first-time player who wants a straightforward caster class. Their class features in the higher levels are actually all the same. I didn't notice any changes from before. All their proficiencies progress in the same way. I will now cover the subclasses and say what's changed. There are 10 presented in this book. I believe they were the same ones presented in the core rulebook before. Remember that Bloodlines give you the following. First, they determine your magical tradition, and you become trained in 2 skills from your bloodline. From my review, all of the bloodlines give you the same magical traditions and bloodline skills as before. You'll also get spells automatically added to your repertoire. Each of them is on theme with that bloodline. Now, I reviewed the spells for each bloodline. There are some changes, but not a whole lot. There are no big surprises here. A lot of them reflect the remaster. So there are name changes or spiritual successors of what came before. And also, there's no prismatic spells. Those apparently have gone the way of the dodo with the remaster also. At least in official publications, you can still use those prismatic spells. There's also a couple spells I found where the replacement was more fitting with the theme of the bloodline. And I won't cover them in detail because there's only so much mileage you can get. It would require a lot of time. Your bloodline also gives you an initial bloodline spell. These are the focus spells, the replenishable spells that sorcerers get, with the option of taking feats to get better bloodline spells later. And then there's blood magic. Whenever you cast a spell that's rooted in your bloodline, you get this temporary effect for 1 round, or you can have it happen on another creature. It depends on your bloodline. And here we see a good number of changes. Again, they seem to focus their design time with the sorcerer on reworking blood magic. This also says that when you benefit from it, you must choose 1 blood magic effect. Now, that is news, because before you only had the blood magic effect from your bloodline, but we're going to see it's possible to have more than 1. All right, we'll now go over the bloodlines, and I'm only going to go over the changes. The first bloodline is the Aberrant bloodline. This is our Tentacles bloodline, Cthulhu bloodline. Everything here is pretty much the same, including the occult tradition, because of course, and the bloodline spells. However, the blood magic has changed. Before, 1 creature got a +2 status bonus to their will saves for 1 round. That also had, if you went by rules as written, the possible effect of buffing your enemy if you targeted a foe. Well, that's now been conveniently removed. We now have this new effect. Either you get a choice, make a target get a -1 status penalty to will saving throws, or you gain a +2 status bonus to will saving throws. Now, they've removed the possibility of applying a buff to an ally. Now it's either you or foe. Next is the Angelic Bloodline, still the Divine Magic tradition. The Bloodline spells are largely the same. It's just that Celestial brand, that was the one that used to target an evil creature and give your party bonuses against it. Now alignment has been removed, of course. Now you must target an unholy creature. And now it's your holy sanctified allies instead of your good aligned allies who can do extra damage to it, now spirit damage. Now this made me realize that there's no option for a sorcerer to become sanctified, and it would seem completely appropriate for an angelic sorcerer to be able to do so, to me. I just want to make that observation. The blood magic is unchanged. You get to make you or a target get a +1 status bonus to saving throws for a round. A nice protective option. The next bloodline is demonic. Here's the one spell change I'm going to mention. Abyssal Plague at 5th rank has been replaced by the patently cooler Blister spell. Their initial bloodline spell, Glutton's Jaws, has changed. It used to be a 1-minute duration spell that gave you a new unarmed attack that additionally could heal you when you gobbled up their flesh. Now it's a single 2-action activity that takes a bite out of somebody adjacent and does more damage. It also scales better than the previous version of the spell, but it's only a one-time thing. And I'm not sure what I think about this change yet. I don't know. The other bloodline spells are similar, and the blood magic still gives you an option to lower someone's armor class for a round or give yourself a status bonus to intimidation checks for 1 round, except that the bonus to yourself is +2 instead of +1. We'll see this happen a few more times where the bonus to yourself on like a skill usually is now doubled. The next bloodline is the diabolic one. This has to deal with devils. No surprises here, still the divine spell list. Their bloodline spell, Diabolic Edict, however, is, okay, it's the same, but it has an issue that I don't like that has been unchanged. This is the one where you tell somebody to do something and they get a bonus to their checks if it's toward that goal. It can turn into a +1 status bonus to attacks, for example. However, it can only work on a living willing creature, which in my Bloodlords campaign with a nearly all undead party seemed like it didn't make sense. Why would a devil's orders only work on those who are alive? The Prince of Hell, Asmodeus, taps into void magic with their divine font, so why not command intelligent undead? Anyway, that's another Rules Lawyer house rule that I use. I allow it to apply to all willing creatures. The second bloodline spell, Embrace the Pit, has been changed. It still gives you resistance to a number of types of damage. However, you no longer get resistance to evil damage or weakness to good damage. Alignment, of course, is gone, but they also didn't replace it with any analog in spirit damage or with damage with a holy or unholy trait, which I thought was an interesting choice. It's now just a simple buff. The last bloodline spell, Hellfire Plume, which once did fire and evil damage, now does fire and spirit damage. And again, no chance to sanctify as a sorcerer, which I do wonder whether that option should be opened up to at least this bloodline and the angelic one, and the demonic one. The next bloodline is the draconic bloodline, our dragon's bloodline. This has some significant changes because of the changes to dragons with the remaster. We no longer have the good-evil divide between metallic and chromatic dragons. Dragons in the remaster are tied to the 4 magical traditions. Your magical tradition no longer has to be arcane. It can be any of the 4 traditions. It depends on your draconic exemplar, which we'll get to in a second. Your bloodline skills used to be arcana and intimidation. Now it's one of the 4 tradition skills, I'll call them, and intimidation. Now, your draconic exemplar can be one of these 4, one corresponding to each of the traditions. And additionally, these determine some of the spells you must take in your repertoire. In addition to these, the book gives the option of keying to one of the 8 dragons presented in the Monster Core book. You can work with your GM, but it already gives you what you can use for each of the 8 dragons. For the Bloodline spells, Flurry of Claws has seen a change, similar to what happened to Glutton's Jaws. Before, you had 1 minute of having a new unarmed attack that did slashing damage and extra damage of a type corresponding to your dragon. Now it's a single 2-action activity called Flurry of Claws, where you make 2 attacks, each against a different enemy, and your multiple attack penalty does not increase for your second attack. This also does damage that scales better than the previous version. And your additional damage is determined by which of the 4 magical traditions you have. For Arcane, it's Force, Divine is Spirit, Occult is Mental, and Primal is Fire. So I think this is an interesting decision, and I think the reason is they did not want these Bloodline spells to overlap with unarmed attacks you might get from other things, such as a bite attack from your ancestry, or the unarmed attacks that you get when you drink a bestial mutagen. So it now fulfills its own niche, I suppose. These new spells have the manipulate trait, however, and I'm not sure I like that, because you want to already be in melee range when you use this, and it might provoke reaction. And if it's reactive strike, it might be disrupted. The second Bloodline spell is Dragon Breath. Before, you had a lot of different kinds of breath, a lot of different breath shapes, and some of them called for fortitude or even a will save. Now it's been simplified. They all do a 30-foot cone and call for a basic reflex save, and their damage type is dependent on your magical tradition, the same types that we saw in the spell before. The Dragon Wings Bloodline spell is the same, and their blood magic is also the same. You or a target gets a +1 status bonus to armor class for a round. I think the +2s are reserved to skills, which are usually more situational. The next Bloodline is the Elemental one, and this also has seen significant changes. As before, you choose an element, and before it was pretty pedestrian. Your damage type was either fire, if you were fire, obviously, but all the other ones uniformly did bludgeoning damage. And you would have spells like Fireball that would simply do bludgeoning damage instead if you were one of the other elements. Now we have different damage types and different spells that you get depending on which of the 6 elements influenced your bloodline. And yes, there are 6 elements in Pathfinder now. We now add metal and wood to the traditional 4. Each of them now does a different damage type. Actually, bludgeoning is pretty common here. I'll read through them. Air does slashing, earth does bludgeoning, fire does fire, metal does piercing, and both water and wood do bludgeoning. But whereas before they all had to deal with produce flame and turning it into bludgeoning damage, they each have a unique cantrip that is appropriate for their element. So very cool, more diversity, more uniqueness to each element. As for your Bloodline spells, Elemental Toss and the third spell, Elemental Blast, now do the damage type that we just talked about instead of just fire or bludgeoning. And Elemental Motion, the second spell, which gives you a different form of movement, they have now added water and wood to it. Water now gives you a swim speed, wood gives you a climb speed. The blood magic is the same as before. This is the one that lets you do extra damage per spell rank. This stacks with the class feature, by the way. Or you can give yourself a bonus to your intimidation checks for a round. The bonus is now +2 instead of +1. The Fey Bloodline is still primal magic, and the Bloodline spells are largely unchanged. Your blood magic effect used to let you make a creature concealed for a round. Now you can only make yourself concealed, and you also have the option of instead giving yourself a +2 status bonus to performance checks for that period. The Hag Bloodline still gives you occult magic, and the Bloodline spells are the same. And the blood magic effect has been buffed. Before, when you cast a spell rooted in your bloodline, the first creature that damaged you before the end of your next turn would take 2 mental damage per spell rank of the spell that you cast to trigger it. That damage has now been doubled to 4 mental damage per spell rank, and in addition, if no creature damages you, you still gain temporary hit points equal to the spell's rank, and that lasts until the start of your next turn. So there's some consolation prize here, and it will always have some positive effect every time you trigger it. Next is our Imperial Bloodline, still an arcane bloodline. Their bloodline spells, I think, were arguably situational and not very useful before, and so they've seen some change. The first one was called Ancestral Memories. You became trained in a skill that you were untrained in, and it only lasted 1 minute, and the only lore skill you could become trained in was the Ancient Empire from which your bloodline sprang. And I could see this being pretty situational. If you were untrained in the skill, there was probably a reason why you weren't that interested in it. Versatility is power, however, so I wouldn't have completely ruled it out. Anyway, it's been replaced, and we'll see what the replacement is in a second. The advanced Bloodline spell you could get was called Extend Spell. If a spell had a duration of 1 minute, this metamagic feat would extend it to 10 minutes. Again, kind of situational, 1 minute duration spells are usually combat spells, and you probably don't have another encounter within 10 minutes. Maybe if you're rushing the dungeon, but you might not want to. You might want to heal or refocus between encounters. Okay, this is what they've been replaced by. The new Ancestral Memories basically gives you +1 on your next spell, either on your next spell attack roll or gives a foe a -1 penalty to their next saving throw against a spell you cast this turn. That's decent, and it also heightens. At 5th rank, it becomes +2. At 8th rank, it becomes +3. The advanced Bloodline spell is now Extend Blood Magic, which extends the duration of your blood magic by 1 round, so it lasts 2 rounds. The blood magic has also been wholly replaced. It used to give you or a target a +1 status bonus to all skill checks for a round. Now it's a personal defensive buff, giving you a +1 status bonus to either your armor class or to saving throws. Pretty vanilla, but every +1 matters. We also see overall that these changes move away from skill usage to attacks with your spells and defending yourself against attack. The last Bloodline is the Undead one, and there's nothing to report here that has changed. It's still a Divine Bloodline, and there's a couple of spells that have been replaced. They're more thematic. For example, Horrid Wilting now is Canticle of Everlasting Grief. Alright, now we move on to the feats, and there are not many changes to feats outside of the ones that affect your blood magic, where there's been a good deal done. So let's get the other feats out of the way first. The level 4 feat Split Shot has been changed. It's a spell-shaped feat, formerly called Metamagic, that you spend an action on before casting a spell to alter the spell. This one lets you target 2 foes with a spell that normally targets 1 foe. It's been buffed. Before, it had to be a spell that was instantaneous and only did damage as an effect. And each target, if you hit them, gets 1/2 the damage you would deal. Now you get your full damage against the primary target and potentially half damage against the secondary target. Also, it can be a spell that has other effects besides damage. However, those other effects cannot extend to the secondary target. It just has to be a spell that requires an attack roll. Currently, there are a number of level 4 evolution feats, one for each magical tradition. They each give a different ability that suits that tradition. They're largely unchanged, with one exception. Arcane Evolution, this is the feat that allows you to have another spell in your repertoire that day, or to have another one of your spells be a signature spell that day. Before, all of the spells in your repertoire had to live in a spell book. Now the spell book requirement is gone. It's all in your head, and you don't have to worry about losing a book. The level 6 feat Energy Ward used to be a level 10 feat, so it's been lowered by 4 levels. This is the one you can use as a free action immediately after casting a spell to protect yourself against a certain kind of energy. Not only is it lower level, but gone is the requirement that the energy type you want protection against has to match the energy of the spell you just cast. You can now simply choose one energy type in this list, regardless of what you cast. The level 6 feat Spell Relay used to be level 8. That's the only change. This is that cool one where basically an ally spellcaster can use you to basically relay the spell and extend the range, using you as the origin point. Alright, now we move on to the blood magic feats, and by my count, there are 11 of them to talk about. They really want to make blood magic more useful and interesting and improvable with the remaster. From lowest level to highest. First is Blood Rising, a brand new feat, a level 1 feat that gives you a reaction when a creature targets you with a spell that is in the same tradition as your bloodline. You get to activate your blood magic effect, either on you or on the enemy targeting you. The trigger is that the enemy targets you, so if you get a bonus to your defenses, that applies immediately against the triggering spell. The effect ends when your next turn starts. Next is another level 1 feat called Tap into Blood. While you are benefiting from a blood magic effect, you spend an action to do one of these 4 things, depending on your bloodline. If you're arcane, you get to recall knowledge using your Arcana skill, and you cannot critically fail. If you're divine, you get to move yourself or someone else to protect them. You can step or reposition a target using your religion skill. Despite the flavor text, the second sentence says any target. You apparently can use this against a foe. If you're occult, strange mists allow you to step 10 feet. If you're primal, then the power of nature is in your voice, and you get to try to demoralize somebody using your nature skill. So this is interesting. It gives you arguably more powerful actions if your blood magic is in effect. Kind of cool. The next feat, Anoint Ally, level 2, is unchanged. This is the one that lets you grant an ally the benefit of your blood magic. It basically, for 1 minute, becomes transferable to your ally if it ever gets triggered. I just include it here because its value is now improved because there are ways to buff blood magic now and share that benefit with an ally. The level 2 feat, Bleed Out, is something you do right after you cast a non-cantrip spell from your bloodline. You basically channel that energy against somebody as far as 60 feet away to cause them to bleed. It's persistent bleed damage equal to the rank of the spell. Pretty cool. Next is Propelling Sorcery. This is our first feat that gives you an alternate blood magic effect. Remember, you can only have one blood magic effect. You choose which one it is when it's triggered. Instead of the blood magic effect from your bloodline, you can get Propelling Sorcery. You either immediately step as a free action or move the target 5 feet in a direction of your choice. An interesting one since positioning can be so crucial in Pathfinder. Then we have the level 8 feat, Cross-Blooded Evolution. And some of you may be wondering, what is it doing here? That's the feat that gives you a spell outside your spell tradition. Well, that's what it used to do. They've replaced it entirely with this. You gain the blood magic effect of a different bloodline, and it becomes another option for your blood magic effect for you. So if you like the blood magic effect of one of the other bloodlines, not just your own, you can take this with that, and it gives you more versatility. Now I'm going to jump ahead and look at the upgraded version of this, Greater Cross-Blooded Evolution at level 18. This lets you gain 3 of the Sorceress gift spells from that same bloodline you got blood magic from earlier. Those were the spells that, if you had that bloodline, you must add to your repertoire. These spells, when you gain them, are heightened up to your highest spell rank or second highest spell rank. I assume the importance of this is if those spells are outside your bloodline's spell tradition. So getting a spell outside your spell tradition and outside your bloodline spells has been delayed from level 8 to level 18 now in order to accommodate that getting their blood magic effect. Not sure what I think about that. I figure maybe give them the choice with the level 8 feat instead. I looked at the old version of this and it allowed you to pick 3 spells from other traditions you could pick and choose, and they could be of different spell ranks. I figure maybe they thought that was overly powerful. I don't know. Alright, back to blood magic feats. The level 8 feat, Explosion of Power, gives you another alternate blood magic effect. Raw power explodes from you. In a 5-foot emanation, they take 1d6 damage, and the damage depends on your bloodline, which of the 4 traditions. It's what we've seen before. Arcane does Force, Divine does Spirit, Occult does Mental, Primal does Fire. Level 12 is Blood Sovereignty. When you would benefit from blood magic, you can benefit from 2 blood magics at the cost of losing hit points, equal to twice the rank of the spell that triggers it. This allows you to have more than one target for your blood magics. Level 12 is Terraforming Trickery. This is another alternate blood magic effect. Now, I don't know why there's an action symbol here. All of the other blood magics resolved when it was triggered. I assume that's what happens here. You can make every space adjacent to you difficult terrain, or do the reverse, turn difficult terrain into regular terrain. Next is a level 14 feat called Blood Ascendancy. This requires Blood Rising, the level 1 reaction that triggers your blood magic when you're the target of a spell in your tradition. When that would trigger, you can instead choose to benefit from 2 different blood magic effects, instead of just 1. And these can target different creatures. The last one is kind of badass. It's Reflect Harm, level 14. This alternate blood magic effect makes those who would harm you with magic harmed in return. It doesn't always trigger. You are counting on them attacking you after you activate it. But if you take damage from a spell before the start of your next turn, you attempt a spell attack roll against the creature, and on a hit, they take the same amount and type of damage that you just took. So they get the full damage. If they cast Disintegrate against you, you get to try to reflect it to them, and they get the effect of the spell as well. Note that you have to actually take damage from the spell. You can also double the damage on a critical hit. To which I say, damn. It doesn't even say that this is a reaction, which I'm going to guess is an omission. Otherwise, rules as written, it doesn't cost you any reaction either. Alright, there's no level 20 feats to report on, unfortunately, they're unchanged. But I will highlight Spell Shape Mastery. It's unchanged from before. This is the one that lets you use a spell shape feat as a free action instead of as an action. And I just highlight it because I didn't talk about many spell shape feats today, because many of them were not changed, but they can be a big part of your Sorcerer if you choose to take those feats. Bending the effects of magic, altering it, is very much a way you can build your Sorcerer, and you become especially good at it with this feat. Alright, as usual, I will talk about the archetype, and there's nothing to report here. It's exactly the same as before. We got your usual stuff, getting skills with the dedication, feats that give you spellcasting, that give you Sorcerer feats, and a level 4 feat to get a Bloodline spell, yada yada yada. Alright, final thoughts time. Overall with the remaster, we've seen most classes getting a buff. And here, the buff to the Sorcerer, the main news is what I said at the beginning. They have stronger spells. They do more damage or do more healing with their spells. Other spellcasting classes are more complicated. The Oracle has a curse you need to manage. The Wizard has a spell book that you need to prepare spells from to predict what spells you'll cast that day. Those features give them versatility or weird benefits in the case of the curse. You're the spellcaster that says more. More damage, and also more spell slots. Again, this is a great class for those who want a more straightforward spellcaster. It's nice to see blood magic revamped. In play, I've seen it usually forgotten, particularly the ones that gave you a temporary 1-round buff to a skill of +1. Those buffs have been improved to +2, and also you get to enhance your blood magic in a number of ways via the feats. I appreciate this, and I'll also note at the same time they're not quite as spectacular as what you might do with an Oracle when you increase your curse, where you take on disadvantages to do more spectacular effects. These are more modest, which makes sense balance-wise because there's no drawback. And I'll also point out that the change to cross-blooded evolution means that your outlet to get something outside your magical tradition and outside your bloodline is kind of closed off, I think, until level 18. Now, I don't know if that's a bad thing. I'm not complaining here. I just felt it was important to point it out. You do have a lot of spells to deal with already within your niche. So that's my Sorcerer coverage. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like the video and support my channel and subscribe. Ring the bell to get notified about my next videos. Support my Patreon to get ad-free early access to most of my videos and exclusive content. And join my Discord. We talk about Pathfinder 2e and other gaming. And if you want to play Pathfinder 2e, we have a drop-in, drop-out organized play system called Endless Tale Tavern. So that's it. I've been Ronald the Rules Lawyer. I'll see you next time.